within Britain, the church is extensive, diverse, and definable. It brings together all who embrace experientially those distinctive gifts of God's grace, the charisma, that are specifically listed as gifts of the Holy Spirit in 1 Corinthians 12, 7-10. And just to note, if you do have your notebooks, that the continuing growth of our constituency is both indigenously propelled and diaspora driven. So it's a constituency that exists both within and amongst Britain's historic traditions. If we go to the next slide. And the slide after that. Thanks, Ben. So Dr. Hugh Osgood, an amazing leader in Britain and also the former Free Churches moderator, he's helped to identify 4 major church planting waves to distinguish the different strands of Pentecostalism and the charismatic movement in Britain. And I'm really excited. You'll hear me saying excited a lot. It's my favorite word, because we have great speakers with us tonight from each of these traditions. So the first one that he characterized is the Britain's Indigenous Pentecostal Church. So these are churches that formed in Britain at the time of the Pentecostal movement's initial impact in the early 20th century. And a lot of them gathered together, these Indigenous Pentecostal denominations, and they expanded at home and also abroad. So they are continuing in strength, and a lot of them are still the most geographically spread churches across Britain. They are very well established and they are making a lot of impact with congregations in towns and cities across Britain. So we actually have Reverend Chris from Elim, who will be speaking to us about that tonight. If we go to the next slide. Thank you, Ben. So another wave that Dr. Hugh Osgood characterizes is the Caribbean Diaspora Pentecostal Church. Now, a lot of these churches started as an invitation from the British government as part of the Commonwealth to really rebuild post-war Britain. So this led to a lot of immigration, particularly in the 1950s and 60s of Caribbean citizens. And a lot of them already had roots, established roots in the Pentecostal church back in the Caribbean, and they came and did a lot of church planting here. Now, as many of you on the call will know, a lot of them experienced a hostile and frosty reception, but that didn't deter them. They went on to build churches across the nation that we are still benefiting from today. A lot of them have their own premises and they've contributed to the life of the UK, as well as building schools, contributing to the socio-political landscape and advocating for the rights and meeting the social needs of many. Within that, you can see on the next picture, that's Bishop John Francis there, that's a second generation of Caribbean Pentecostal churches. And a lot of them now have British headquarters. And these started to emerge in the 1990s. They were very contextual, visionary, entrepreneurial, and were setting up churches, particularly in London and also across the UK. We then see Pastor Mike there with Boris Johnson, and we also have him on the call. How lucky are we to hear from him tonight? So this is now a new breed of Black British churches, and it's attracting a lot of millennials, young people, and is really looking to the future. So I won't talk too much on that because we're going to hear firsthand, but it really does explain the nuance of the hybridity of Afro-Caribbean culture really living in British society. And then you can see Kingdom Choir there. All of you saw them sing for Meghan and Harry's wedding. They actually come from the Church of God of Prophecy, a Caribbean diaspora-led church. So we can see the movement that is taking place. If we go to the next slide. Another church that Dr. Hugh also emphasizes is the Indigenous Charismatic church movement. So in the 1960s onwards, we have new Indigenous churches with an openness to the gifts of the Holy Spirit, which was forming in Britain. And a lot of these members actually came from a lot of the historical British churches. They met in people's homes, and it gave rise to what we know as house church movement. So we actually have Richard Bradbury with us today from Ground Level that represents this part of our constituency. And again, we're looking forward to hearing from him. And this is a whistle-stop tour because we literally have about 5 minutes. So I will post the link for you to do further reading if you so wish. If we go to the next slide. We then have the African diaspora Pentecostal churches. So we see a lot of immigration taking place in the 1960s, but this really compounds in the 1980s and 1990s, where a lot of African communities are coming to Britain. They're contributing to the ecumenical, see it's in the blood, economical landscape of British society. They're developing careers and really start to build entrepreneurial churches, a church planting culture, and we see this spreading across the UK. Many of them also have an imperative for reverse mission, so re-evangelizing the UK and set up independent congregations in schools, community centres and former industrial units. So we see a real creativity happening here with mission and reaching different churches across the UK. Redeemed Church of God is one of the fastest growing from this category of churches, and we have Pastor Marcus. He will be speaking to us tonight from that constituency. We go to the next slide. Then we also have other diaspora Pentecostal churches. So we wouldn't want to paint a narrative that all Pentecostal churches are either African-based or from the African Caribbean diaspora. As you can see, it's indigenous. So there is a real hybridity of different Pentecostal and charismatic movements taking place in the UK. This sending and raising pattern has been repeated, particularly from the South American community, Far East Asian, Eastern European. So you'll see a real mix of diaspora groups in the UK from the Pentecostal and charismatic tradition. And just on that vein, tonight we really do want to dispel the myths again. If you go to the next slide for me, please, Ben, that the movement is predominantly African, Caribbean. It's very mixed. It's a global movement, one of the fastest growing, and you'll see that in the speakers that we see tonight. And finally, I'm coming down. As a Pentecostal, we love to say that, and I am coming down. 1 more minute left. So within Churches Together in England, the Pentecostal and charismatic presence has been with us since the 1990s, and it's grown significantly since that time, both numerically and ecclesiologically as well. So today, CT includes all strands of the Pentecostal and charismatic movements, and it also, as of 2021, represents 45% of CT's memberships. That's 23 of our 51 national member churches. And some of the key areas of work that we're looking at is our forum, which meets twice a year. We have monthly prayers that happen each month. We are also establishing a new Emerge Young Leaders subgroup, bringing together different Pentecostal youth leaders to look at where we're going in the future, government legislation, and we also deliver theological conferences.